Well, I am so stoked because we have the another participant panel, which is facilitated by Jenny. So I'd love to invite Jenny up on screen. Hi, Jenny. How you feeling?
Hey, I'm feeling great, but like you, a little bit sad that we're in the last few hours of this conference. It's really been a wonderful experience.
It sure has. Just, I mean, full to the brim, as they say. I'm from Alabama originally, and we used to say, I'm full as a tick, which is kind of gross. So I'm sorry I shared that with everyone. Uh, but anyway, we have a question to ask you, Jenny,
Okay.
and I'd love to know what progress, if any, you've seen during your lifetime for a gender-healed world.
Well, that's one way of saying I'm an elder. um, Surprisingly, I would have to say I've seen a lot because I was coming into adulthood just out of university and getting a job in the very early days of the women's liberation movement, which is, we don't even use that word so much anymore. And I was a beneficiary of that, but it was tough in the early days. And when I look around now at the laws that have been enacted for better gender equality, just for men and women, and now legislation against hate crimes and things like that that penalize sexual or gendered minorities. We have a long way to go, but I think it's hard for some people maybe to realize how far we actually have come. My husband was one of the first people ever to bring a lawsuit about sexual oppression in the workplace in his native country in Australia. And they actually, as someone had to do here, defined case law. So we finally got a legal definition of what sexual harassment was. And until those steps can be taken, a lot of the groundswell of things that we're seeing here in this conference can't be put in place so that they can protect people. And when I look back now and see the behaviors that I put up with, had to put up with, and I didn't even recognize were oppressive or were microaggressions. And now I think, at least in some countries, we're much more aware of those things. And we're beginning to have the protections in place to make it a safer world for all of us, however we express ourselves. So we may not be there yet, but we've come a long way. I can tell you that.
That's such so wonderful to hear about, Jenny, because you don't often take stock of what has changed over time and draw resource ourselves with that knowledge that things can and do change. And so I think that transitions really beautifully. We should hand it over to you now to introduce us to the participant women's panel so that they can share with us their visions for a gender healed world. Over to you, Jenny.
Thank you. Well, I'm really pleased with the 5 women that we have who will be joining us on the panel today. I'm going to begin by introducing you to Desiree English, and I'll let her say a little bit about herself first so we can get acquainted with her. Desiree, tell us about
Thanks.
yourself.
Thank you so much, Jenny, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for everyone. It's evening for me. I'm Desiree English and affectionately called Des. And I was born in and also now live and work in Cape Town in South Africa. So it is just after 11 p.m. for me. Very happy to be here with everybody. So my entire career has been in people development, first in the area of human resource management. And then I was drawn into youth development and working in the space of trauma healing and being very ever so gently drawn into working with women in that trauma healing space, and then divinely called and invited into the gender healing and transformation space. So I describe myself and what I do as a trauma-informed, healing-centered process facilitator, if I want to give myself a title. And it allows me to bring together all the wonderful parts of who I am. and who I am becoming as well. So earlier on, you have met Will Keepan and Cynthia Briggs, the founder of the Jerry Work, Gender Equity and Reconciliation International. I am very honored and humbled to work alongside them, as well as all the other colleagues, as the director of training for Jerry and as a senior trainer in the work. And then lastly, in South Africa, we have a non-profit organization called Gender Works, and I support the work of this non-profit in the capacity as chairperson of its executive committee, where as an affiliate to Jerry, we plan and implement the Jerry programs in South Africa, as well as support the growth and expansion of this work in East Africa and beyond. Very happy to be here.
Thank you, Desiree. And I wondered if, before we go to our next panelist, if you could just tell us a little bit about what it's like for you to walk the world as a woman, where you are, and perhaps in some of the other places that you visited with your Jerry workshops. What would non-binary trans people, what would men need to hear about your journey in the world as a woman?
Mm. So what comes to mind immediately, and I've been so touched by this theme of safety that has been spoken about in this gathering the past few days. My body has always been an unsafe place for me. It's been a tense place for me most of my life. It was the equipment with which I carried my head around, where I lived and did everything. And my body was how I determined, how safe I am with someone, with people. And so how I dressed and how I held my body and how I moved was how I created safety for myself and in the world, because I grew up afraid of men, growing up with an alcoholic, an abusive father, and witnessing him beating up my mother and us as children as well. So it's taken me a while as a 52-year-old woman at this point in my life to be comfortable in my body. And so I kind of notice that and really resonate in the stories of women, how much pain and trauma we have experienced in our bodies, on our bodies, and how the violence of the words, the sexual abuse, the molestation has landed with violence on our bodies, and how we walked around with that. And where I am at now, because of the work that I have been able to do and witness and experience, that I can feel my body, that I can enjoy my body, I can bear to look at my body, and I can feel my emotions in and through and around my body. And I can drop from this place, this headspace, into my heart. And I can be authentic, and I can speak and hear and offer witness to others as well. Because in my head, I can be very structured, I can be very clear, I can be very, very organized. And in my body, I can feel, I can flow, which is really wonderful for me to experience. And so being able to create and share safe space for others to be able to work towards experiencing the same thing has been a real gift for me as well.
Thank you, Des. That was beautiful to hear, and I'm sure resonated with many people. Next, I'd like to introduce us to Meg. Megan, would you come on, please, and tell us a little bit about who you are? And then I'd like you to answer the same question. What's it like for you to walk the world as a woman?
Wonderful. Hi, my name is Meg Six. My pronouns are she, her, hers. Just to frame my perspective, I'm a bi cis white woman. I'm autistic and have ADHD and deal with chronic pain. Sorry, someone's driving by really fast right now. I'll just wait just a moment. Okay. Professionally, I'm a marriage and family therapist, and I hold my limited license in Michigan in the United States, and I own my own private practice called Sixtus Therapy. And in my work, I support identity exploring folks in times of transition. So sometimes that looks like supporting people in pursuing gender affirming care. Otherwise, it's exploring relationship structures or just other life experiences and and just those like big phases of life that folks are going through. One of the things that's resonating with me from what Des said is just creating more safe spaces. I think that idea is really important. In fact, initially, I wasn't a therapist in my professional life, so I'll kind of hop over to the second question. But initially, I worked in real estate and competed internationally in sailing, and those weren't very safe spaces. I was sexualized, constantly objectified. There was just a large focus on appearance. And once again, Des, I absolutely resonate with that feeling of just not being safe most of the time. And I didn't realize that I didn't feel safe most of the time. My strength and ability was often doubted or surprised people. And my more masculine traits, which I now understand to be more related to my autism, were perceived as negative, blunt, too much. And I think one of the comments my mom made to me recently was that she thought things would have been easier for me if I had been born a man. And I think that's true, right? The expectations that we have for the ways that people show up in spaces can be burdensome. And I survived in those spaces for a long time with perfectionism. I minimized myself and the things I was experiencing, assumed that everyone else was going through or struggling with the same things. And of course, because there's so much bias in our mental health care system, it wasn't until the last 2 years that I even understood that I was neurodivergent, and the last 6 months that I realized that I was autistic and sought diagnosis for that. And things have shifted over, leaving my old career and becoming a therapist. I've been able to move into a space and work with other clinicians who are so truly amazing. And I think I was, maybe a month or two into that work and just had a realization of how safe I felt, and what that was like to be able to provide that to clients was just so huge. And I think, one of the big things I've learned about being a woman and existing in this world is that things can look really, really good on the outside. That veil of perfectionism is absolutely brutal, because things are not always how they seem. And I wish I could go back to my younger self sometimes and help her be more gentle with herself. But we're here now and getting accommodations now, taking rest now, and feeling that safety more and more every day.
Thank you. I just agree so much with everything everybody's saying. They're so resonant. Thank you for sharing that, Mega 6. And next, I wonder if we could go to Nico. Nico, would you come on, please, and tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey, or what's up for you being a woman in this world?
Yeah, thank you. So I had a very, I feel like I've lived many lives in one, also in relation to gender. I'm a sexological body worker, tantric, shamanic, and complementary healing practitioner, and transpersonal psychotherapist in training. And in relation to gender, and to the absolute privilege of being able to be in this panel now in 2023 and seeing something like that happen, what strikes me is that the way that I grew up with a difference that I couldn't put words on in a rural Switzerland was felt very violent to the development of my soul. And I felt like I didn't belong to the boys and I didn't belong to the girls. And I'm neurodivergent as well. I have ADHD. And so I suffered tremendously. and I suffered so much that I was estranged from my family very early, kicked out of Catholic boarding school very early, and ran away to Mexico and started a life initiation that has brought me through many different experiences of gender, of social class, of different contexts. And what has been most relevant for me in my experience of healing has been encountering, well, funnily enough, a queer group that started in the gay men's movement called the Radical Fairies. And I sort of in person and completely fell in love with the place and found a way to then have a really wild exploration of gender by exploring hormones and exploring sexuality in a really free way, and in a way that helped me to map somatically and shamanically and I think intrapsychically my wounding, and also aspects of identity that I knew went beyond my experience of perhaps this lifetime that feels a bit difficult to describe, but around this personality and this particular embodiment. It's been many years since, and I have had many other stations in life that were relevant to my gender experience. A lot of them have been violent. I have apprenticed in carpentry in timber frame building in Switzerland, which was a really harsh environment to be in. I've experienced sexual assault, I've experienced abuse, and I had a lot of pain around what it means to walk this world as a female-bodied person and to belong or not belong to this group called woman. And the reason why today I am reclaiming that word for myself is that I feel that the subjugation of that word, of the feminine in general, across all genders and spectrums, and understanding the feminine as a polarity that is not synonymous with gender, is for me is one of the big causes that I see of the way the world is today, with this absolutely abominable paradigm of subjugation and power over and ravaging abuse and war. And I feel very privileged to be able to be here. I had to miss most of the weekend so far, but I will catch up with the recording, and it's been an absolute joy to hear you speak, to the other speakers here on the panel.
Thank you, Nico. I just want to mention we're having a little bit of trouble with your signal. It's a little bit weak. We may have to switch you just to audio if there are further problems, but so far we're okay. I'm struck by how many people who have spoken have mentioned having a transpersonal background. Yossi, the person who put this conference together, was a former student of mine at the Institute of Transpersonal Psychology in Palo Alto, now Sophia University, and several other people have referred to that. So I'm proud that we have so many people with a transpersonal orientation who are a part of this gender reconciliation movement. Next, I'd like to go to Emily, if we could. Emily, would you come on and introduce yourself, please? Tell us about yourself and what it's like for you on this your woman's journey here.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emily. I'm calling in from Boston, Massachusetts. And I am so honored to be on this panel with my sisters here. We're last but not least. And I am here because Will and Cynthia advertised this beautiful sounding panel, Engendering Love. And I just knew I needed to be here. I knew there was a lot I needed to learn. And every person, every story has engendered love. So I will try to speak in the language of the soulful realness that everyone has spoken in. So let's see. So I grew up, I'm going to start with my girlhood. I grew up in the 1970s in a very girl-centered family, 3 girls, wearing rainbow shirts, playing in the driveway, all that good stuff, listening to Free to Be You and Me. And it was a very secure upbringing, loving family. And I was really proud to be a girl. I don't have any abuse in my story, and I almost just want to highlight that. I just hold everyone's stories my story. I don't have gender-based violence. I have other struggles, which I'll share. But I do feel like the 70s was a great time to grow up, even when I went through a phase where I had a bowl cut and wore clothes that looked kind of boyish, but a lot of people did then. And sometimes I'd get the, hey son, you got the wrong bathroom. And I didn't like that feeling, but I always just felt good to be a girl. And I guess I just feel I grew up in a family with a strong grandmother, Swedish grandmother, who was like the matriarch, and my mom and my sisters, and we had this close sisterhood. So I also grew up in an evangelical background. So needless to say, I had a lot of deconstructing to do. So probably most of my gender wounding comes from that background. I've always kind of pushed against it. And over the years, I developed a calling. You could say it's my mission field to just work toward a more gender-healed world within the religious sphere of things, and really supporting faith-inspired change agents to work for a more gender-balanced world. Another thread in my story, which I'd love to bring out, is just being a mother. I have 3 babies who are now in their 20s, so they're kind of launched. But it was a transformative experience being a mother in this way that I look back and I'm kind of in awe of it. Actually, where I'm sitting was where I nursed my babies. And just the primal love of having life in my womb. Labor and delivery was kind of grueling, but beautiful in its own way. And nursing babies, and just, I guess, this mother bear love that feels like it came out of my womb, and extends to my babies, but also to the world. So in this metamorphosis, I started a foundation with my husband called the Imago Dei Fund. And that's the context where I've worked with Will and Cynthia around the Jerry work. I also started a project called The Girl Child and Her Long Walk to Freedom. And I guess I'll just leave it at the girl child. It's very hard to grow up as a girl around the world. So my vision for a gender-healed world is that we would create a world that girls deserve, that welcomes girls with safety and respect and all the opportunities to be all they can be. And by doing that, we create a better world for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Emily. I'd love to see that vision, and I'm intrigued by the thread that many people have touched on here, which has involved being wounded in from a religious or spiritual context, and talking about traditions that were not valuing of who they were in their doctrine. I'm sure we'll be touching on that again later. But for now, I would like to introduce our last panelist, Ruth, who's coming to us from the UK when she can break away from the coronation activities, as she was discussing in the green room. Ruth?
Hi, thank you. So hi, I'm Ruth. I'm a computer scientist and I'm a yogi. I live in London. I am a menopausal mum to 2 teenage girls, and I've been married for 20 years. And I started working in the field of computing, in particular human-computer interaction and artificial intelligence 30 years ago. Though I discovered yoga when I was about 8, which is kind of unusual because it was the 70s and it was just a thing that weird people did back then. Like now it's super cool and you get loads of accessories. But so in my daily life, I deal a lot with binary and logic whilst I roll out my yoga mat and think about the non-duality of life. And for me, when I think about technology, it's an amazing thing. I fell into it by accident because I'm from a council estate in Middlesbrough, and women's prospects. Well, it was the time of massive unemployment in the 70s and 80s, and women's prospects were quite, well, I didn't have any really. My mum's greatest goal for me was to get married. When you look back, you think, wow, what if I didn't want to get married? You know? So, but once I found out that technology is about people, and it's less about, well, it is about, you know, software, but it's all about people. I mean, technology today has made this possible. But I now tell people that designing software for anybody to use is a political act, because it changes how we work, how we rest, how we play. And we need to design things with love. And we need to have as many women as men in technology, because on my course 30 plus years ago, I was in a minority, and I'm even more in the minority now. The last time I did a database course, there was one other woman in the room who wasn't me. The rest of the room was filled with men. And to this end, I go about trying to explain technology to women to make it accessible for them. I gave a talk recently to the Women's Institute about how exactly ChatGPT works, because yeah, there's this fiction that it's going to take over the world and solve all our problems, but really we solve problems by staying together and hearing each other out, and everybody should have a place at the table, and everybody should listen to each other and hold that space. And so that's my goal, to go about as often as I can explain technology to anybody who wants to hear me, in order for them to think about the ways that we can use technology to make a better, more equitable future for all. And what would I like other people to know about me, non-binary and men, what it's like to walk the world as a woman? First of all, it was made clear to me, partly because of my background, that it was my duty and also a massive gift for me to have children. So when I had unexplained infertility, I was then a failure. And then I birthed my first child, and she had renal failure, and I had to do it by cesarean. So then I was another failure, and then I had a second child by cesarean, and it's just kind of endless. And then I had breast cancer. It's been quite full on. And when I came out of it, the first thing that people said to me was like, brilliant, you've come back out of menopause, you can have more children. I'm like, oh my God, stop with the children thing. You know, it's just like, I'm not, you know, it's brilliant. Don't get me wrong, it's a great joy and privilege, and I'm raising girls. And life has changed a lot. As Jenny was saying earlier, that, you know, I have seen significant changes, but also in the time between me and my children, as girls, and things that they don't tolerate, and they stand up and correct what's going on around them. And thankfully, schools have protocols and principles in place to make the world fairer for them. But they're still having the same sorts of conversations about appearance, about being stopped on the street and involved in conversations about the way they look or how they present based on their gender. And it's just, I'm just like, oh, seriously, are we still doing this now? But then the teenagers give me hope, because they're switched on, and they work, and they make a difference, and they speak up, and they help each other, and they have a lot of, you know, I see a lot of hope, and it's quite magnificent, really. Yeah, working, it was, Meg said as well, working in computing, sometimes I was on bridges because I was collecting data, big data, and the gender disparity, the excitement of having me as the only woman on a bridge, it was just exhausting. It was just, and then it was the care I had to take about, not only did I have to be great at my job, I had to be perfect, I had to be brilliant, I also had to look attractive. I had to put up with, Sally Kempton used the phrase in the panel at the beginning of the talk, sexualized dialogue that I didn't want. I wasn't interested in having a conversation about it. It was deeply unprofessional. It put me off my stride. There was like lots of difficulties, and I didn't always have the language and the terminology to shut that down as a young woman. And now I'm older, and cranky and menopausal. Apparently, because I turned 52 this month, apparently I will go invisible. And I'm like, great, bring it. I'd rather be able to fly as a superpower, but you know what? I'll take invisibility. Fantastic, because then I'll be able to do more quietly and rediscover myself. Because as a woman who works, has a home, and I do what's in sociology called the triple shift. I do a lot of the emotional heavy lifting, and I do it in the workplace. I do it in social situations. I step in and have the hard chats. Often I get stonewalled, and often I do it wrong. But I try, and yeah, it's an amazing life. It's an amazing life. It's also really tiring at times, and it's just really brilliant to be here and to discuss this with everybody else. And yeah, I'll just keep going about telling everybody to do tech and to, help come and sit together, and we'll all be agents of change for good. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you. There's so much in that. And for many of us who are working, those things still happen. I've been in traditionally male fields myself for most of my career, so I certainly can resonate with that experience, and Nico, the other people who have brought up issues like this. Let's open it up so that everybody can chat for a few minutes. We don't have long left to talk, but I'm wondering, we've had some ideas about what a gender-healed world would look like, or how it would be different from today, but I also want to give you the opportunity to respond to anything you've heard from any of the other speakers. Who'd like to speak first? Nico?
Yes, can you hear me okay with
Yes.
the bandwidth? Okay, great. Yeah. I just wanted to say, in terms of the gender-healed world, it's something that is so been on my mind lately, also in relation to you pointing out that there were a lot of people with a transpersonal background here. Well, as we are learning more about human nature, and as lots of different disciplines are starting to be able to collaborate and cross-pollinate in exploring, the mystery of life and consciousness and what makes us, these beings with these identities and ideas about life and each other, I find that there is something about a completely new understanding of what these polarities are that we call masculine and feminine, and what identity exactly is. And just seeing that there is so many complex layers that go into this thing called, subjectivity or a being. And so, I want to keep it short, but the main thing that I just want to say is, for me, somebody said earlier, everybody should, everybody should be able to speak, and everybody should be heard out. And for me, it's really about this spirit of curiosity, and also this sort of wild unknown of how can I meet you as freshly as possible, and how can we actually come to a much more basic common denominator instead of further dividing out, which paradoxically I think allows for a plethora of diversity, because diversity is, it's ineffable. There's so much of it, but there is common denominators that unite us. And for me, that's what I believe in this dialogue and in this culture making and weaving belonging. To something that goes beyond trans in every sense. Yeah, thank you.
Great idea, Nico. Desiree?
Thank you, Jenny. Meg, I thought you were ready to speak. Please go ahead. Sorry, Jenny.
Yes. Nico, I was just resonating with everything that you were saying. I think my to continue to expand on the ideas you were sharing, I was reflecting on binaries shifting, right? That we might in the future be able to just hold duality and not have to connect it to good or bad, right? That a binary can be, and it doesn't have to have a value proposition added to it. And I see that connected to a reduction in fear, right? Greater capacity to love. And with that reduction in fear, right? More openness to hear others' stories. Because honestly, as a therapist, if I could give everyone the experience of sitting with stories of people in their community, I would like hand that out like candy on Halloween. But I know it's not something that everybody has access to. So, but yeah, I thought that just sort of paired well and was similar to the way I was kind of conceiving things. So thanks, Nico. And Des, I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Meg. I'm trying to choose which of the points that I have kind of feels very strong and so feel very intuitive to say that my vision for a gender-healed world is for me as a woman of color with my brown skin and with my naturally curly and frizzy hair, that I not be looked at and that I not be valued and judged lesser than a white woman with straight hair, or even a woman of color with straighter hair than mine, that there's no judgment, there's no comparison, that we can just be seen as human beings and be celebrated for who we are. And then linking to that, just the role of media and the media images and social platforms, that can become a safe place that my 17-year-old daughter can safely navigate and have a positive experience, and that it can add to her, my nieces, all girl children, all women, everybody, that it can be a positive space for them in terms of who they are. And it's not demeaning, it's not degrading, it's not bullying, it's not traumatic for them. Yeah, those are the two things I just wanted to name now. Thank you.
Very
great.
important points. Thank you.
Yeah. Can I just yeah, I totally agree, Des. And I just think the technology already exists. There's no need for the amount of abuse on Twitter. You could easily have, an algorithm to run through and stop that. We pay YouTube moderators $8 an hour to see and witness the worst of humanity. And in a gender-healed world, in a balanced world, we would use technology to replace these worst jobs, to eradicate and to educate. And I think the technology exists that we could implement stuff to get rid of, all the abuse that happens online, and also to provide platforms that are safe, that people can digitally storytell their own lives and find their tribes and have a voice and be role models to other people and find their role models. Because quite often the stories I've heard is that people don't have anybody like themselves and they feel isolated. And the idea of being able to find other people more easily, especially if you live in a very small place where you feel ostracized, then it can happen and help. And we design with love and psychological responsibility and people taking care of each other.
Thank you, Ruth. Emily?
Sure, I know, I agree. There's so many thoughts in my mind. It's hard to know what to bring forward. I guess I want to bring out just my work in women's philanthropy, just supporting faith-based and faith-inspired change agents, and helping to convene some Jerry circles. I guess the deep stigma that still exists around the female body, the curse of Eve, all these traditions and stories, and how dominant religion is. I just want to highlight that I think, we want to create, we want everyone to be able to be themselves. And I think that's something I really, just listening to everyone's stories, the joy of just charting your course in life and being able to be yourself in all your complexity and not to feel like confined to a box. That is so important. And the female box in so many places, it's hard to even know how heavy it is. Girls come into the world presuming their own equality, and they just enter into a world. Even if there's one woman named Esther who I met, she in Tanzania, she said she went to college, she graduated, and she thought she would be honored in her family. And, where she said, when you walk through the household, the threshold, you're still just a woman. And, that like we can do all this women's empowerment and everyone here on this call is doing this. But I guess the sociological systemic stigma that still hangs over everything is hard to even name. It's almost like, something that we need to let out of the windows, and it can exist even in progressive settings. So that's one thing. And I guess that I wanted to name something. I mentioned I have not, I want to say I love the working for beautiful masculinity. What does that look like? And in a lot of the Jerry circles, just seeing men who are more feminist than most women I know and get it on this level is beautiful masculinity. And I can't even say how healing it is. So I just want to do a deep bow to all the men, to everyone who is really unambiguously lifting up the feminine. It's deeply healing. There was another point I was going to make. I guess just the embodiment of being female. I think there's something, I want to highlight that's not something many women, we don't want to essentialize ourselves, but that is an essential, like just having rhythms in your body that mirror the rhythms of Mother Nature is a joy. But it's also can be suffocating and can swallow you up. And women work so hard around the world to just hold life together. So my vision of a gender healed world is that we would all work together to co-create the world that we all want, where we can all have leisure and we can all be ourselves and pursue our callings as they feel suited for us. So thank you.
Thank you all very much. These have been wonderful insights. It's been inspiring to hear from all of you, and you've brought up so many thought-provoking points about how things are, what it's like to be a woman, and many of the things that we have to contend with, still some that we will always probably have to contend with, like our bodies and how they're different. And the power, though, the expansion, the hope that I think women carry, because we also can carry life in our bodies, new life, whether we do or not. I am also a childless woman, and I share some of those stigmas about failure and what I was supposed to do and how are we enculturated, many of us, to bear children. And when your path is different, you have to really create your way yourself, one step at a time. So what I'd like to do is maybe end this on a note from Pat McCabe in her talk this morning, her Indigenous wisdom about a different way of looking rather than the power over and binary man-woman polarity of a lot of the white world, the Western world, the Anglophone world, to look at that philosophy that she brings to us from American Indigenous wisdom, that maybe a different worldview where our measure of success is when one thrives, we all thrive. Mm-hmm. And that can be everybody's story. Mm-hmm. We just have to remember that and hold on to it and help that other one thrive. So thank you very much. I'll hand it back to our loyal MCs. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Oh, wow. That was so beautiful. Thank you so much, Ruth, Des, Emily, Nico, Meg, for those beautiful comments. The chat is open, so let us show our panelists some love in the chat for those insights. Jordy, it's amazing to me. I mean, this is really deconstructing for me the idea of expertise. There's some people who need to be up on stage and some people who don't, that literally everyone has a story and everyone has deep wisdom and insight that all of us can benefit from hearing. That's one of the things I'm really appreciating so much about these participant panels. And not only that, but the soulful, I think it was Emily who was talking about, reverberating with the soulful tone that everyone has been speaking with throughout these couple of days. And just amazing to me to see all of these panelists also just step in so beautifully to that. So I'm just curious, what was that like for you, listening to these incredible women share their perspectives?
I couldn't agree more. One of the things I tell people all the time, they'll call me or ask me to be a part of something and say, well, you're a queer expert. And I say, I'm an expert of what queerness means to me. I say not every bird is an ornithologist. Not every expert is an expert of every life. So we're all experts of our own experience, and giving people time and space and platform to share that expertise is so beautiful. I'm super grateful that Engendering Love is doing that. And I just loved hearing everybody's experience, strength, and hope. Same
Jordy, you've done it again. You're such a poet. Not every bird is an ornithologist, but every bird has a song. And together we can sing something beautiful. So we are headed to a break now before we come back for our final 2 hours of this session. So we are looking forward to seeing you for those last 2 hours. So see you back then.